This is Narrabeen Lagoon near the Narrabeen Bridge. Former Pittwater Councillor and Mayor David James is measuring the lagoon water level at the Pittwater Road tide gauge. Northern Beaches Council wants to bring barges loaded with construction materials in through these shallow waters. This gauge is the datum that establishes just how much water covers the bottom.
Here we are, doing our bird survey along the northern shore of the central basin of Narrabeen Lagoon. It's a beautiful place, and already this morning I've seen 3 royal spoonbills, 2 egrets and 4 black swans. And it's just been idyllic out here, as well as probably 100 black cormorants. This is the work site for the much controversial elevated cycleway walkway that the council has opted to build, and thus bring the industrial era to the otherwise primitive shore of Narrabeen Lagoon. That's the barge there, which is supposed to, when placing, if it was going to be used, it's supposed to have not less than 200 and preferably 400 millimetres under keel clearance. But the lagoon is so shallow up there where they're delivering the material to that it couldn't possibly comply. And the problem with that is that big propeller, that large motor, is stirring up the very shallow bottom and creating turbidity, which is a problem wherever it occurs, but in this particular corner there is proven habitat, food source for the black swans, which have only recently made their beautiful reappearance on Narrabeen Lagoon. So that's why it's a cause of concern. That's one of the reasons. And I've received assurances that there will be no turbidity allowed to escape from the job site. Unfortunately, I thought that this method of engineering and environmental construction plan had been abandoned, but it appears not so. And it's, in my view, highly problematical. Anyway, there on our shore is one of the spoonbills. There's a pair of them there, but they seem to be courting because they're quarrelling with one another. There he goes, on float. I think their species is Platylia regens, which means royal spoonbill. Beautiful creature. And they can only operate in shallow waters, such as this walkway is going to be constructed in. And to me, that's a terrible shame. The process is that they have to drill pier holes down 1 metre into the rock shelf up here, and then they have to put, I think they're around about 65mm steel pipes down into the rock shelf and then concrete them in, and then they bolt timber bearers across the top of them, and they encase the steel pipe in polyurethane pipe. So they've started that process up here. They claim that it will be an additional adventurous experience compared to what it would have been if it had remained along the shoreline. Not only do they put a boardwalk 3.5 metres wide out into the lagoon where they're going to put a viewing platform out there. It's totally unnecessary in my view. There's viewing platforms along the shoreline, previously built not 400 metres to the west, and another one several the other side of Deep Creek Bridge. And they say that it will enhance the enjoyment and experience of human enjoyment and experience of the lagoon, for which I'm all in favour of people getting as much enjoyment out of the natural environment, but not at the cost of the natural environment. Look across here. That beautiful panorama hasn't changed since the days of the indigenous populations that lived on this shore. Apart from a roadway that you can barely see, there's Garigal National Park, which we fought for and got. And it's such a shame that we have to intrude into the lagoon with a built structure. I want to ensure that the offsets, environmental offsets which have been promised, the dog-proof fence, the regeneration and so on, is done to the highest possible standard, and that we minimise as far as possible human impact in this. Look how passive and beautiful it is. Such a shame. Yeah. As we can see, the site disturbance currently is being contained on site with that yellow boom, and to that extent that's what was promised. But the delivery method of bringing those steel sections up here on that barge with an outboard motor in these shallow waters is just unacceptable. Along here, that is going to be regenerated. Nice spot, eh? Wait till there's 10,000 people. I think the figure's 10,000 a week, trundling along around the lagoon, which is lovely. A thing for which I and Jim Somerville and other people, Tom Webster, fought to have through the National Parks and Fitness, Sport Recreation, and achieved it. So it's in danger of being loved to death. Pedestrians that are in danger of being run down by high-speed bicycles. Well, in the words of the council staff, this was a more exciting, a more adventurous, albeit more expensive way of doing it. And I appeal to all of the elected councillors, because this was dealt with as a simple staff matter. They voted a sum of money for $373,000 in the draft minutes in 2017. 5 weeks later they upped that by another $800,000, and it was pretty clear that what they had in mind, and at that time they said to the RMS, we've come up with a more adventurous but more expensive solution. We got this costed at $800,000 to do an onshore semi-cantilevered widened track, which had to be done in this section. And this thing's going to run out at something like $3 million, I think. This bed of weed here, there's a range of things. There's Zostera capricornia, right on the outer limits of its survival in this western basin. But more importantly, there is Rupea, which is the preferred feed of swans. And this is where we're right on the line of the walkway here. We presented photographs to the councillors of 13 and 14 swans sleeping on the wing, feeding here on this very same alignment. We provided the evidence and they wouldn't call it to council. They left it to the staff. Yeah, that's the line of the walkway, 13 metres off. It is just impossible to get 400 millimetres clearance, underkeel clearance, under that barge that's being used to deliver materials on site. The various studies, the feasibility study, the biosis report, the marine pollution report weren't put out there on public exhibition in that sense that I would expect. All we got was in April 2018 was, this is what we've decided and this is what's going ahead. There was, the councillors threw the ball entirely to the staff. It was all the councillors' role in this was voting the sums of money. And I appealed to the council to call it in and at least consider this. And there was not one councillor who did so. There are people, including the bicycle fraternity, who are very keen on it. There are people who are more concerned to see the natural environment preserved and not be impinged upon in such a drastic way, who would far rather the existing historical landscape there wasn't cluttered up with this. The problem is, where does the values lie that superimpose on that area benefit for people who want to thunder along there in a bicycle at 35k?
David James, an Emeritus Mayor of Pittwater, has lived in and on the lagoon for 70 years. David has clearly established that normal water levels are insufficient for barges to deliver the materials to site in this way. Further, he questions, where is the construction and environmental management plan? What is the true cost? Where are the updated studies covering this completely new method of construction? And why the secrecy? And Pittwater Pathways asks, where is the net benefit? Because at the moment it looks like Council wants to give tourists a more adventurous experience at considerable cost to the environment. Is it the case that what was once held dear in Pittwater is now cheapened and expendable in the context of a Northern Beaches Council?
So there's one of about 3 viewing platforms along this stretch to the Western Basin, unobtrusively perched in the bushland, don't impinge on the beautiful waterway itself, and yet 400 metres to the west, to the east, we're going to have one out in the water to enrich the viewing experience of humans. I can't think that's really necessary.